At the very outset, I would like to offer my greetings to all of you. Uh, Now, I am going to continue the discussion on the evolution of international legal framework for human rights. This discussion means, as I already told you, that discussion is about the um, evolution of international legal framework. It is not a discussion on the evolution of human rights as such, because history of human rights, as I in my previous lecture I told you that that is beyond the scope of our discussion, because if I am going to discuss the history of human rights, that it will consume our most of the time. So or one can say, and we cannot do justice with the topic which presently I am discussing. So for that reason, I am not discussing the history of human rights. I am discussing the, you can say, the history of the international legal framework for the protection of human rights. And for that purpose, I was telling you last time that for that purpose I will focus on the major milestones. Instead of going into the details, means details about the what are those conventions, or what are those non-binding, what are those other international instruments which comprise the international legal framework, and enforcement mechanisms about the human rights. So that is also not my purpose to discuss that thing in detail, because when we after giving you a general idea, this time I'm giving you a general introduction to the international legal framework. Once I finish it, that then means after means this discussion on the major milestones of the this development of international legal framework. After that, if it is possible, and if it is you are interested, and if you can say, if I have the time, I will have the time, then I will surely discuss the each and every important convention, declaration, whatever declaration that may be, such as UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or if there is one very important declaration, that is the Vienna Declaration on Human Rights, that took place in 1993. And it after that we establish, at the international level we establish an United Nations Office of the United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights. So that was means that was decided during the declaration, that we should have a commission for human rights, commissioner for human rights. And also it was decided at that time that at the national level also the states should means they should establish national human rights commissions. So many states after that, they developed National Human Rights Commission in their country. They passed the law. India was also one of those states who very early acted on this. And in 1993, you can see Human Rights Act 1993 was passed by the Parliament, and under that uh, the provision was made for the establishment of the National Human Rights Commission, State Human Rights Commission, and what are their functions, what are their powers. So this time I'm not going to discuss that. It is not the topic of my today's discussion. And also one more important thing, that important thing in our means protection of human rights act, is that it also provided for a human rights court, and that human rights court was to be established in every district. and it was provided that with the consultation of the Chief Justice of every High Court, the state government will decide that which means session judge that should be given the responsibility of this responsibility means which judge should be selected, which court should be selected as a human rights court. Uh, in practice, normally that what I observe that normally this human rights court, it is the senior most session judge. You can say that was yeah, first you can say first additional session judge was given this responsibility, and perhaps and I can also say that UP, perhaps UP was the first such state that established for the first time human rights court. I remember that thing distinctly. That time I was student, so but I remember that that time we established that. Now, okay, it is one thing. So, what I was telling that I'm not going to discuss this thing. I was telling that BINA declaration, UDHR, Universal Declaration, they are declaration that they have very important role to play from the point of view from the point of view of promoting the idea of human rights, and you can say towards creating sensitization of about human rights, towards awareness of human rights. So from that point of view, they are very they have a very critical role. They played a very critical role. And as far as the UDHR is concerned, I was telling you last time that Universal Declaration of Human Rights is such a instrument on human rights which can be described as the most successful instrument on human rights. Last time I was also telling you that although when Universal Declaration was passed on 10 December 1948, at that time it was passed as a common standards of achievement for all peoples and all nations. So it was very clear from the very beginning that it is not means incorporating any legal obligation. It only prescribes standards, and states are encouraged to achieve that standard. So that was the main purpose, and in that purpose, you can say the UDHR achieved a grand success. You can say, or you can say huge success. So last time in my previous lecture, I was also telling you that I was started telling you about the importance of the 10 December when UDHR was adopted, and a day before that, means on 9 December, we also adopted a very important human rights instrument, and that was convention, not declaration. So from that point of view, that development is also very important. But UDHR became so famous that we forgot about that what happened on the 9th December 1948. On 9th December 1948, we adopted the Convention Against Genocide. And truly speaking, that was the first international treaty which was adopted under the auspices of the United Nations. So, UDHR is not a treaty, as I already told you. So, but one thing I should like to make it very clear, and I can also offer my apology, and that perhaps in my previous lecture I confusingly told you that on 9 December the convention which was adopted by General Assembly was Convention Against Racial Discrimination, but that was a slip of tongue. Uh, that I now I admit that this mistake, and you can correct it. One more mistake, I can say one more correction is needed in my previous lecture, which I realized means after finishing it, that when I was just telling you about the UDHR, then I wrongly, or you can say um, by slip of tongue, I means I told you that right to privacy is not given in UDHR. It is not listed as a human rights in UDHR, but that is incorrect. Right to privacy is listed in Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it was also it was further incorporated in the ICCPR also, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which is a treaty, means which followed the UDHR. One right, you can say, that which UDHR mentions, that right to property, which was not you can say repeated in those conventions which followed it, means it was not carried further. Right to property. So now the question you may ask, and it is a very important question, maybe very important question from one point of view, that why right to property was included in UDHR, but right to property was not carried further in, it was not given any place in the ICCPR. And interestingly, I can also tell you one interesting point, that in our constitution also, in the original constitution, we included right to property as a fundamental right, but later we after 44th amendment we removed it. 44th, or you can say 42nd amendment, we removed it, and the right to property is no longer a human right, fundamental right under our constitution, and it was given a separate, it was provided under a separate article 301 perhaps, which talks about the right to property. So you can say that why this happened, that means initially we adopted the right to property as a human rights, but later on we dropped that idea. The reason is that it reflects the thinking of that time. Means when the UDHR was adopted, and when our constitution was originally adopted at about the same time, that time right to property was considered a very important component of human rights. But there was a reason for that. Region, as far as the region is concerned, this time I would means this time if I am going to discuss that, it will be you can say, will say that you are now digressing from your main topic, but still I can tell you one thing, and when we will discuss UDHR in detail, then I will discuss that aspect in some detail. But today this time I am giving you just some clue about that, why it was considered at that time very important right, and nowadays it is not considered as important right. The idea, actually, this right to property, this idea that people have a natural right to property, this idea it was part of the Lockean philosophy of human rights. John Locke conceived of three types of natural rights: right to life, right to liberty, and right to property. And when means American Declaration was adopted on the basis of this Lockean philosophy in 1776, 4 July 1776, Then the drafters of the United States means that declaration, which later became part of the that which later became a basis of the United States Constitution, which was prepared. Constitution was adopted sometimes in 1887, 89. So, but this declaration was independence was adopted in 1770, 1776, and Constitution was framed in 1789. So, in preamble of the declaration, the drafters of that declaration they made a slight change that they said that we all human beings are endowed by creator certain with certain inalienable rights, and that includes right to life, right to liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So they slightly they change it. While Locke included right to John Locke included in his theory right to property as a natural right, why he advocated right to property of natural right, the reason is historical, because John Locke belonged to that school of thought, and there are other philosophers also who favor this thing, that actually what is the what is really means what is that upon which I can claim that I am owner of this thing. Certainly you cannot be owner of another human being, but but still that practice was that practice was prevalent, that the slaves, there were the practice, slavery was in practice that time, and slave trade, slave practice, that was taken a very normal thing. And it was also thought that slaves are not the full individuals, they are not full people, and they have not, so they should be treated as a slave. So but Locke said that what you can own, what is your own, when you say, this is my own thing. So nowadays it is possible that you go to the market and you go and you purchase a thing and then you say that it is your thing. But in those days it was not as this process was not as means means as easily available, means as today you can easily do this thing. In those days you couldn't do that. So what now question was that how uh, Locke said one thing, that when you use your labor, and when you use your skill, suppose you have some skill, and on the basis of your skill, using your skill, or you can say talent also, or your labor is also very important thing that time in those days. Now these days means it is not important that you must be physically strong enough to do some work. So but that time it was also necessary that you should be physically strong enough to produce something. So if you are producing something on the basis of your skill, labor, talent, whatever you can say, and and you are using the natural resources, and you combine your labor and natural resources, and after that you produce some new product, new thing, that will be that you have the full right over that, means you can say that you are owner of that thing. So from that point of view, at that time, right to property was very important, because it was this idea that provided that acted as a motivating factor, that motivated the people to use their skill, and combine their skill with the natural resources, and then they come out with a new product. and by that way they were also serving the society. That was the beginning of the, you can say, the manufacturing process, and later it developed so much that it was the basis of the industrial revolution in England. So now you see that, but now you see the why we abandoned this idea. We abandoned this idea in this period, modern period, or you can say is in contemporary world time, contemporary period, that mainly after 50s, why we this change this idea, that when Locke gave this theory, that time natural resources were so, means in abundance, that there was no issue regarding the availability of natural resources. So you can use natural resources, could use natural resources without any means without any uh, kind of hurdle, without any kind of interference from the side of any authority, that no, it is a natural resource and you cannot own it. It is for the public at large. It is for the in the interest of the whole world. Uh, what we today think. So that time this was not the thinking, because natural resources were in abundance. For example, land was in abundance. Anyone can go and produce, you can say, agricultural products on the land. So there was, at that time there was no means natural resources were in abundance, and need was, what was the need? Need was the there was the need of innovation. Means at that time also, in you can say, in we have the means the source of crude oil in sea, but although we have the resources, but we did not have the technology, we did not have the skill, so that we can get crude oil from that. So to promoting the skill, to promoting innovation, Locke's thought that it is necessary that people should be given right over something which they created. Otherwise, they will. Why will they? What is the incentive in creating something if I cannot own it? So, but this theory has changed now. Now, what happened? That's just opposite. Now we are facing the problem of scarcity of natural resources, because population has grown, much grown. So now we are facing the problem of scarcity, and whenever we are facing the problem of scarcity of natural resources or anything resource, you can say the wealth, or you can say sometimes merit goods, then what happens that you are to take some decision regarding the how, what should be your mode of distribution of resources, because resources are scarce and people are many, and you want that the resources should be distributed to all the people, so that all should have the happiness, some kind of happiness, so that as a whole the society will be happy, more happy. So from welfare point of view, now you start thinking that now we distribute our natural resources of our country uh, among the people. So what happens that now you have to begin with certain idea of justice. Here I would like one thing, I will discuss that thing. I would like to tell you one thing, that justice, as I previous in my previous lecture I said that thing, that justice is an aspect of is an aspect of morality. Morality is a very wide concept, and The justice is a segment of that. One day I will discuss in detail what is the meaning of the morality, because sometimes you find that that in my lectures that I often emphasize on the morality, and I find the basis of law is the morality, and human rights, basis of the human rights is the morality. Since in those days there means the concept of human rights, you can say, was not fully developed. It was in the process of the development. So nowadays human rights has developed, idea has developed, and we have a legal structure also at the national level, at the international level, at the regional level. So now everything can be decided on the basis of human rights. But why we are making this so to justice, idea of justice? The reason is that whenever you are concerned with the, what is the difference between morality and justice? Now see, whenever you are concerned with distributing something, that may be the merit good, or that may be the some wealth even, or that may be some natural resource among the public. Suppose you want to distribute among the public, so that all the poor peoples, they should also have some minimum amount of natural resources, so that although those who are very, you can say, intelligent persons, those who have the technology, those who have the skill, those who have the means who are have the education, quality education, so by the use of natural resources they can create wealth for that, for them. But what about those who are poor? And they are not poor because they are means, you can say, they are lazy. They are poor because they don't have the access to technology, they don't have the access to quality education. So if they don't have the access to quality education, so how can they acquire that kind of skill by combining by combining that skill with the resources, they can produce certain goods. So, from that point of view, you say that yes, now we should distribute it. And now, when you are facing this question, that how to distribute the natural resources among the people, then you are in dilemma, and that dilemma can be addressed only by the idea of justice. And it is this difference between this, it is this thing, that there is difference between justice and morality. Why I am calling it justice? Because here you are concerned with with two groups of people, means one group which may be called as haves, groups of haves, and the another group which is have nots. Now you want to take some resources, or you can say, that depends upon the how does it fit to your scheme of the justice, that you are not taking the resources from the haves, means persons who are rich, maybe in the form of taxes and maybe some other form, and now you are giving benefit to those who are have nots. So now here you have two classes of people, and now you have to distributing the wealth among two class of people. So when you are going to distribute something, I suppose you are going to distribute something to the people at large, then the question of the justice becomes important. Otherwise, question of justice has no significance. It is only important because when you have the power to distribute something, and your distribution is about means that you are not concerned with a single person, you are concerned with the society at large, then you have to use certain model of justice. That which model of justice we should prefer. One model of justice, you can say, there are egalitarians, means who believe in the equal rights. So if you ask them, they will say that that is what is also, you can say, distributive justice, the theory of that was given by in many centuries before Christ by Aristotle, distributive justice. This is called the distributive justice. Otherwise, justice had no role. It is only here it is role, that when you are going to distribute something, suppose you are means you are the chief of your family, you are head of your family, and you have some wealth with you, and you want to distribute among your children, then the question of justice arises. That suppose you have given all your property to your eldest son, and you have left nothing for those who are means those other sons and daughters. So here everybody, you ask that, everybody will say that the father has not done justice with his children. So justice, question of justice arises when we are concerned with the distribution of something. But this time I am telling you, it is not my view. I am never telling you my view. It is not my view. It is means what I am telling you. It is the crux of the views of the scholars who are well known in the field of the theories of rights and justice. I am giving you the gist of their opinion. For example, one if you are interested in knowing this thing more, so you can study one very famous work, The Concept of Law, by Professor H.L.A. Hart, and where he discussed what is morality and what is justice, what is legal obligation, what is moral obligation, and he discussed in detail that what are the similarities between legal obligation, what are the similarities between moral obligation, and how justice differs from morality, and when the question of justice arises. He explained it in his famous Concept of Law. I think every scholar of law and political science, they are knowing this thing, this book, The Concept of Law by Professor H.L.A. Hart. So now you see, he said that whenever you face this type of, now there are many of I was talking about the models. One model, that one someone say that you distribute it equally, but the liberals, there are two types of means the even the scholars who have their opinion on the justice, they are divided into different groups because they adopt a different approach regarding this. So there are certain means egalitarians who say that equally distributed. There are utilitarians who say that it should be distributed in such a way that it is maximizing the happiness of the maximum people of the society. So that is a utilitarian purpose. If it is serving the purpose of the utility, means it is increasing the welfare of the society as a whole, that should be your concern. And if they are not telling you particular method of distribution. They say that whenever you are face this situation, then you always think this principle in your mind, that you must adopt a method of distribution which is, you can say, increasing the welfare of the society, which is to the maximum level. But there are third class of scholars who are known as the liberals, and whose theory is based on the human rights, and it is very interesting. And they say that no, utilitarian will not work. This formula will not work. That even if you have, suppose you have equally distributed the wealth. So suppose today the government of India decides that we means those who are in policy makers, governments, or you can say legislative body, or all the. So suppose they decide that that now we will distribute all the resources to the people equally. but still it is not a guarantee. It does not give the guarantee that whom you have given the wealth in equal amount, whether they will be able to use it in a prudent manner or not. So it will not work, never, it will never work. And there is also one more, I remember, I was reading Bentham. Bentham has written a very famous book, which Principles of the Morals and Legislation. And in that book, Bentham, at one place, as far as I remember this time, that Bentham says that no, you cannot do this thing, that you cannot distribute property rights among all the persons, because what happened that the people acquired the property, means there is no question of historical justice, because those who have those who have acquired the property, actually they acquired it by violence or by some other things. And when you make any attempt to redistribute it, so it will now incite or generate the problem of violence. So that is why he is saying that no, it is better that you do not attempt to redistribute it. But problem arises that when something is in scarcity, resources are in scarcity, then you have to adopt a model of justice, which you can say not equal, but which I studied, I was telling you, which at least conform to this idea of justice, that distribution should look like equitable or fair. Equitable means, this theory was given by John Rawls. John Rawls has written a very famous book, and it is a means, I think that everyone means every person who is you can say the aware of all these things, rights and justice, he must be knowing the theory of justice, a theory of justice. So his theory of justice is opposite to the theory of utilitarian. He says, he gives a formula, and that is very interesting, and I cannot capture all those ideas in this time, because that I have already, as far as the digression is concerned, today I already met the digression. Considerable means the main topic, I left the main topic inside, and now I am talking about the justice, which I know not chosen today for the today's discussion. So, but John Rawls says that okay, you there is two. He says that first of all, one thing this should be made clear, that all individuals of a society, they have the right to equal liberty. And once you have ensured this thing, that everyone has equal liberty, then in that situation, then he applies a second principle, and he says that you see that if the redistribution of any merit, good or resource is not going to affect that person from whom you are taking it, then it is justified. Means if you are taking it from, suppose you are taxing, you are imposing tax on those who are earning much than other segment, much more than other segments of the society. So if you are taking the wealth, means you are taking the money from them through taxation or through whatever way, and then you are distributing among the poor, then what will happen that it will not be going to result in the welfare of the poor group itself, because when the income of that group of people who earn the money and who have means they anyhow they by investment or by some skill they have they have grow, they have increased it. So if you are taking their money, so what will happen that they will restrict their activities, market based activities. They will not buy a new thing, they will not going to means fill their means to petrol pump, and they are not going to they will suppose they decide that I will not own any car. So what will happen, the person who was working as a driver, he will be unemployed. So what John Rawls says, very important thing, that you whenever you are distributing, keep this thing in mind, that it's okay that you are increasing the happiness of the poor, but at the same time you should also ensure that it is not resulting in the disadvantage of the poor. He is not concerned with the disadvantage of the rich. He is concerned with the disadvantage of the poor. Okay, your intention is very good. You are taking the money from rich and distributing it to the poor, but what happens as a result, that the population which is rich, and which is rich because of its talent, skill, wealth, education, they will become, then they will lose all those motivations, which all those means driving factors for the region of that they are acting. And there are some people are acting overnight to create wealth. So what he said, that don't disturb that class, even and you see that even if, even without making any pressure on the rich, if you are able to give take money from them, which is not going to affect their lifestyle or their means means affecting them, and by that way if you can help the poor, because then only it will be in the interest of poor, otherwise the poor will lose his job, it will not increase the happiness of the poor. So now everyone, because in the society the everyone is dependent upon each other, we are all, poor is also dependent on the means those who are rich. So for that reason he says that John Rawls says that then there are other model of justice, but this time I will not discuss. Please, I already made digression, and actually it was so interesting that I couldn't resist my temptation when I means referring to the justice. Then I went to explain this meaning. But as far as the more is concerned, if you want more discussion on this topic of justice, because justice, this theory of justice given by Rawls, it was modified by Rawls himself later in 1970, and he published a new edition in which he modified it to a certain extent. And we know that there is also an idea of justice that was published by Professor, written by Professor Amartya Sen. So he has also his idea of justice, but this time I cannot discuss. I do not want to discuss that, because it will means enlarge our. It will going to means we will be missing the main thing which I want to discuss with you. So now it is already very late, and for that I'm sorry that I started discussing something about the legal framework, and now I was involved in the theory of justice and rights. That is why I always prefer not to involve myself in that kind of discussion because it becomes very lengthy. So now, you see, Universal Declaration, last time I was telling you that Universal Declaration was adopted at a common standard of achievement, but later on it became a legal obligation. And I was also telling you last time that under the United Nations Charter we have various references to human rights, and one very important reference to human rights is to be found in Article 68, and under which the Economic and Social Council was given the task of establishing commission for the promotion of the respect for human rights and the observance of human rights. So it immediately it established a human rights commission, and human rights commission is started first the task of standard setting. Actually, that their task, they set three type of, means the three pronged approach they adopted towards that. They said that first of all we should define what are the rights, define their precise scope, define the kinds of restrictions which can be imposed on the rights, because human rights are generally not absolute. With a few, I can say one or two kind of human rights which are fundamental rights, which I will tell you at the right time. Almost all the human rights are not absolute. So what kind of restriction can be imposed? So this is called they call that this is a task of standard setting. And when United Nations was established and when commission was established, if you look at the work of the commission closely, then it will appear to you that in the initial years the commission was very busy in the task of standard setting. After that, it took the task of promotional activities, and finally it turned its attention to the aspect of the enforcement or implementation of human rights. First they defined human rights, then they did the task of promoting those ideas, and at the third level, third stage, they now means they work on work on establishing the mechanism for enforcement of human rights. So they were doing everything very systematically, and I think that they they prepared most of the drafts of the convention, today's important conventions. As far as there are many human rights. If only we talk about the human rights convention, then I can say you there are many important conventions. There are means something like 18 international instruments are there. Are 18 international instruments which are well recognized that they are 18 in number. But as far as the most essential, you can say, important instruments are 9, which are known as the 9 core conventions of on human rights. 9 core conventions means everyone should know at least those 9 conventions which are internationally recognized, and which most of the countries which are party to it. So after UDHR, then the commission started working on the other human rights convention, and the General Assembly started on the basis of those drafts they started adopting it, and inviting the states to adopt it and to become party to it. And states were also very happily they accepted that, although some states have made certain kind of reservations. So that will be a different thing, that will be that kind of analysis. I am not I can't do this time here. So as far as the 9 conventions is concerned, I can tell you in brief, very brief, because now my time is going to over. Because why I want to limit it to 50 minutes only, or 40 minutes. The reason is that yesterday when I means this prepared a video that was more than 1 hour and about 45 minutes. So I means I struggle. I have to struggle to means you can say to upload it on YouTube. So that is the reason that I'm going to now I'm going to finish it. And I can only say that this time I'm giving you the name of the 9 core conventions, and you can check it from the website of the Office of the United Nations Human Rights Commission. I always have said this thing in my classroom and wherever I was discussing this thing, that there is a very important website, and the OHCHR. You simply type simply OHCHR on the Google, and then Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. This website will open, and there you will find sufficient, or you can say enough material on human rights. And there they have mentioned everything, how many conventions have been adopted by the General Assembly, what is Human Rights Council, what was commission, what is the role of means what is the there you can get the text of all the conventions, how many parties have ratified them, and what is the means general comment on. There is general comment on almost every article of the conventions by the respective treaty bodies. For example, in the case of International Covenant on International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, there is a committee that is known as the CPR, Committee on CCPR, Committee on Civil and Political Rights, and that committee has given a number of explanatory notes and a number of you can say general comment they are called, and through that they interpreted by each and every meaning of each and every article, that what is the meaning of freedom of expression, what is the meaning of the right against torture, what is the meaning of the right to life. So by that way they clarified the scope, and they are very important even though for those who are studying human rights within a national perspective, because it is going to broaden your horizon, because means that when you study fundamental rights within a constitutional framework, your constitutional framework. So if you are aware of the international standard, what is taking place internationally, then by that way you can enrich your knowledge, and you can be critical, you can be more analytical, and you will be able to know the new dimensions which are developing. So that is the advantage of study of the international human rights, that even if you are a scholar of constitutional law, so you can study the decisions of the, you can discuss the decisions of the Supreme Court, High Courts, or the provisions in the light of the international interpretation, in the light of international standards, developments, and how those provisions are interpreted by the international agencies, including some courts also. So say there are 9 core conventions. One I already told you that ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Then there is the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. I already told you about these 2 conventions yesterday. The third convention, you can say that there is very important convention, that United Nations Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. That was the third convention that was adopted in 1965. In this series of convention, it was the third one in 1965. Then we had a very important we adopted a very important convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. The abbreviation is SEDA. You should also know the abbreviation. Abbreviation is also very important. So such as the abbreviation, you know, ICCPR, ICSCR, and in the case of you can say racial discrimination, so that is the convention you can say on the abolition of all forms and racial discrimination. So the committee which was established, that committee is known as the CERD, and CERD is also the abbreviation of this convention. So next, fourth is SEDA. Why SEDA was adopted, we will discuss this thing later. Then the fifth very important convention is the Convention Against Torture. All these conventions are very important. Convention Against Torture and cruel and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment and punishment, and that convention was adopted in 1984, and it came into force in 1989, and then there is the convention. After that, it was followed by, and this abbreviation of this convention is CAT, CAT, Convention Against Torture. And after that, we adopted the convention on the rights of the migrant workers. That was the problem we were facing, international problem. So for the protection of the rights of the migrant workers, we have one convention on that. After that, we adopted one very important convention that was long overdue, and actually before that there were many declarations on that aspect, and even but they need to be updated in the light of the new discoveries and the light of the new scientific output and psychological studies, that we adopted a very important convention, the Convention on the Rights of Convention on the Rights of Child. You can say CRD. CRC, Convention on the Rights of Child. And CRC is a very important convention, and one thing very important about the CRC is that CRC is a convention, Rights of Child Convention, that is adopted by all the states of the means all the members of the United Nations except one state, that is the United States of America. There are 193 members of the United Nations. Out of 193, 192 have ratified, means they became party to it, and there are 2 or 3 more states which are not member of the United Nations, but they have also given their acceptance to it. So now it has 196 parties as far as I remember. So 196 parties means it is almost a global convention. So that is very important, Rights of Child Convention. Then we have one convention on the rights of persons with disabilities, and this convention, very important convention on the rights of disabilities, and actually this was adopted in 2006, although it came into force later in 2010. But as far as our India is concerned, India took it very in a very right spirit and positive spirit, and in 2016 and 2017 they brought 2 very important legislations on this point. One act they passed, Parliament was passed in 2016, at the end of the 2016, that was the Right of Persons with Disabilities Act. So Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. So persons with disability, the abbreviation there is the PWD, person with disabilities. So on that they passed, and this legislation is a very remarkable legislation. And actually, if I will get time, and I will tell about that convention. This time I will not going to discuss, because again it will be a digression. So then I will tell you that how it is based on the very means the contemporary. It is prepared in the light of the contemporary scientific studies, psychological studies, sociological studies, and it's a very good legislation. Although means in every thing we do, in due course it needs improvement, but but this time that is a very important convention, and it was really drafted, very well drafted convention, and it is very sensitive to the rights of the disabled person. And on that account I will this is I will means praise the government that they did a very good job. So, and the second act was also passed in this specific context, and that was the right of mental health care, that was passed in 70. So two very important legislation passed in the last in recent year, rights of persons of disabilities, and rights of persons with disabilities, and rights of and mental health care act. Further, after this, then as migrant workers is concerned, I already told you this, and finally we adopted last, that is the ninth convention, that is the Convention for the Protection of Persons from uh, Enforced Disappearance, and this convention came into effect sometimes in 2010. Now, as far as the India's record is concerned, what is the Indian position? India is a party to ICCPR. ICCPR is very popular. It has 173 parties. ICSCR, India is a party to ICSCR. It has 171 parties. Then India is party to Racial Discrimination Convention against Racial Discrimination 3. India is party to SEDA, Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. India is a party to that, and that SEDA is also very popular convention. And it is about 179 or 178 states they have, means they are party to this SEDA convention. It's very important convention, and it has been in the it is on the basis of this convention that our modern means our thinking towards women has changed. If you are looking at the developments of some last 10 years, then you will feel that 10 or 15 years that we have means there has a major shift in our opinion regarding the women, and now the respect for the women in the society has grown, and very much it has grown. It is the account of this convention, and because you passed the legislation according to that convention, and that convention was the basis of the famous decision given by the Supreme Court in Visakha versus State of Rajasthan, that sexual harassment at workplace, that was a new thing, that was not in our Indian law. That concept was Indian law was alien to that concept. So that concept was incorporated into our domestic law by the Supreme Court on the basis of this SEDA convention. And later on we passed an act also, but still there are certain problems, and when we will have the time we will discuss it. So SEDA is very important, India is part of that. Then Convention Against Torture. As far as the Convention Against Torture is that India signed it in this convention in very beginning 1984, but for some reason I cannot say this time discuss that thing, what are the reasons, and I think I have no idea about that, much idea, that India has not yet ratified it, has not ratified it yet. So India is signatory, but since India has not ratified it, so India is not a party. Although the international community, which as far as the thinking of the international community is that since India is a very responsible state and very means its record in human rights has been very good, so it must should ratify the Convention Against Torture. And actually we were in the process of doing all these things some 10 years ago, I think, and that time we were hearing about the in the newspapers we were discussing about the possible draft of the torture law against torture, and some drafts were prepared also, and it was about to be presented in the parliament, but for some controversy um, means there was no consensus, so it couldn't pass. So, but we after that we forgot about that. So that is the torture that is due, and then migrant workers. I think India is a party to that. Disability Convention, India is a party to that. The one convention that India is not party is the last one, that Convention on the Protection of Persons against enforced disappearance. So India has not become party to this convention act. So overall record of India is, I think, good, if not very good, or if not excellent, but it's really good because most of the convention the India had each party to, and India had also made the legislation according to those parameters laid down in the international convention. So now I'm limiting my discussion today because it is already very late, and today, and as I today means most of the time I devoted on the discussion of justice. I am sorry, and the next time we will continue from here. So thank you very much for for hearing me patiently, and thank you very much.